Hello and welcome back to another video with me, Meoni. This time we're looking at the second part of the live letter 44 during the Letter from a Producer Live. In the second part of the live stream they had their special guest Yasumi Matsuno on, and that person is responsible and is involved in the development and release all of the Return to Ivalice raids, including the new one that's coming as of patch 4.3, the Ridorana Lighthouse. They fielded questions to ask Yasumi Matsuno live, and people could submit their questions like I say, and they chose the best ones. So they actually demonstrated a little bit of the actual raid itself. They didn't want to give too much away, and honestly they probably shouldn't have shown what they already did. A lot of it is quite spoiler heavy, so obviously you've been warned. So after skipping the intro cinematic, they looked around and you can see the Prima Vista behind there and what appears to be another airship, and this is at the Ridorana Lighthouse, so you can see the water there, and we're on the staging area just below the lighthouse itself. If you've ever played Final Fantasy XII, you should probably imagine where this is. So their first boss, as they walk gingerly forwards, appears to show Famfred. He's sort of like a water-related boss from Final Fantasy XII, or at least this incarnation, and they actually show that on the trailer as well, where he throws a vase of water at the Alliance raid and they have to avoid it. Obviously not much information is there on the bosses because, you know, they don't want to give that away, but they gingerly walk forward and tease the rest of the Ridorana Lighthouse. As you can see from this image, if you look upwards you can see how big the actual lighthouse is itself. If you've ever played 12, this is one of the mega dungeons. Hundreds of floors and rooms full of secrets and different sort of puzzles to get through them. So obviously we're going to be seeing a little bit of it, but likely not all of it, since the length of the raid isn't going to be that expansive. A lot of the people that worked on this actually worked on Final Fantasy Tactics in 12, so they put a lot of attention to details and little references to those games, which they're hoping that people pick up on. They discussed how the Crystal Tower series was way too long-winded, and the Void Ark series was created to be purposefully compacted. So apparently when Yasuno-san received the order to create Return to Ivalice, he followed the instructions of Void Ark and created them in a fairly compacted way, without limiting on the storyline. The storyline is going to reveal the links and resolve what is left from the first episode, if you remember it. And to note, apparently all of the dialogue, every single text box, and every little bit that pops up that was said by Ramza and the other NPCs on the Prima Vista were written personally by Yasumi himself. Yasumi then apologized for the blunders he committed during the development of the raid, and apparently the scenario this time is going to be on the same level as the main scenario quest. I think people in Japan are overly critical over their own work, and this is definitely a case of that. I think the storyline was fantastic, but if he wants to step it up, then it's obviously going to get just even better. They want you to actually enjoy the upcoming scenario and read all of the dialogue slowly and enjoy them, so I would imagine that they're going to have quite a bit of a prerequisite storyline to actually unlock the raid, and presumably afterwards as well. They fleshed it out with a lot of side quests as well, and supposedly some crafting related stuff, which is interesting, and we don't really know much about it at this point. They talk a little bit about the featured aura in the trailer that was designed by Oda Banri and wanted to share the creation of this character. Apparently it was created using the usual character creator, and if you like the character shown in a trailer, this screenshot above will give you the entire details so you can recreate it. Apparently this is something that people really want, so, you know, there it is if you want it. Somebody wanted to know the storyline behind the development of Return to Ivalice, and apparently Yasuno wanted to summarize this question into 3 to 5 minutes in a slideshow format, which he created the day before. They go, what is Return to Ivalice? The road from concept to release. Apparently on January the 21st, 2016, they discussed the possible participation in 4.0 development at a New Year's party with Yoshida. On April the 15th, 2016, Yasumi was officially asked to write a scenario for the new Alliance raid. 3 ideas were presented Matsuno-san. First was a story based on Final Fantasy Tactics, a second was a story based on Final Fantasy XII, and the third was an original story. The first idea, a story based on Final Fantasy Tactics, was chosen. On October the 31st, 2016, the plot outline for the storyline was submitted. This included the dungeon and boss count, made the same as the Shadow of Mark series. They wanted to keep it consistent with previous raids. They said that they wanted 3 installments, starting with patch 4.1 onwards. Included in that was 1 dungeon and 3 mini-bosses and 1 final boss per patch. X amount of them will be designed by Keita Amemiya, and also Keita Amemiya did the monster designs as well. On December 24th, 2016, the collaboration was officially announced at the Final Fantasy Tokyo Fan Festival, and on June 6th, 2017, Stormblood was released. On October 10th, 2017, patch 4.1 went live, and the Return to Ivalice story began in the royal city of Rabanastre. And now, in late May, the 22nd, patch 4.3 will go live with Aridirana Lighthouse. And the rest of the slide here is all question marks because they don't want to nail themselves to an actual date or time for the next part. It's likely going to be 4.5 at this point. So in regards to a development concept, apparently they wanted the story to fit within the existing Final Fantasy XIV world. That was a must. They wanted to work closely with Oda-san to make sure lore and language were in line with the series they were representing. They worked with a quest team to see what could and couldn't be done in the game, because obviously they'd just done single-player stuff previously. The story must be compact and fit within 3 chapters, so as the text piled up, deciding what to cut became more and more difficult, because they had to make it fit those 3 chapters. They also had to make it so that players not familiar with Final Fantasy Tactics or 12 or Ivalice in general should be able to have fun as well and generally understand the storyline. In regards to this, they decided pretty early on in development that this was not going to be a sequel to the stories in Final Fantasy Tactics or 12, but a reimagining in Final Fantasy XIV's lore. That way, both players with knowledge of Ivalice and those without could both enjoy the story in their own individual ways, obviously including a lot of nostalgia for those who do know that series. Apparently on the 14-hour broadcast they held last year, the character of Agrias was said to may or may not appear in the game, but later on Yasumi said that he did not wish to bring Agrias in and never said that before, so it might still be possible for Agrias to appear. Apparently the Ramza and Alma models are completely separated, and it did not use any existing model. They created them for this project. Yasumi then went on to stress that the concept is that it has to match Final Fantasy XIV. As you already know, Ramza and Alma in Final Fantasy XIV are Garleans and not from the past titles. This is a completely separate storyline, just using the same sort of themes. They also stressed that the Prima Vista has a lot of NPCs inside of it, and that Yasumi wants to create side stories for all of those people on the Prima Vista. To do this, they're going to introduce a lot of side quests on the actual Prima Vista unrelated to the main storyline, but actually flesh out a few of those characters as well. The 4th question was about exploring Rabanastre and how fun it was because of different routes and the various interaction gimmicks and transferal to the bosses. So what can we expect for episode 2? Apparently they don't want to reuse the same thing they used in Rabanastre, they want it to be new and fresh, and of course there will be some new fun stuff awaiting you ahead. Somebody then asked, I want to fight Yasmat. Can you create a Yasmat boss? The reply was simply, thinking emoji. Someone then asked, how do you decide on which bosses that you use? And apparently it was created based on the overall plot. They show a few images of these massive books that they go through, deciding various factors. Yasumi chose these bosses based on personal preferences alone. And then Amemiya-san designs those bosses. Yasumi's done picking them out from a sort of catalogue that they have that they create for possible ideas. Amemiya's designs will also be seen in episode 2 of Return to Ivalice, so look forward to it. They go into extreme detail on pretty much everything that there is from Final Fantasy Tactics and what they would like to pick and choose from for this game. Someone then asks, can we get the clothes that Ramza and Alma wear? They're quite cute. The answer is, they might, eventually. But first, obviously we're going to be having various sort of throwbacks to Final Fantasy Tactics outfits in the actual gear that drops inside of here, and here's some pictures of that as well. A good question was, Return to Ivalice contains a lot from Final Fantasy Tactics and 12, but will they include Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, also awaiting for a sequel to that? For a Final Fantasy Tactics Advance sequel, please beg the Square Enix CEO for this. What kind of details does he take note of when writing the scenarios and dialogues for Return to Ivalice? Yasumi just writes them as he feels like it, but recently due to technological advancement, like voice and all, he wrote them under the whole impression that there is a voice, so the writing is different from the era where there weren't voices, like in the Super Famicom era. So with the difference in technology, the details of movement in characters also became more complex, so he has to write them accordingly accordingly. Do you have any references and influences for your work? Yasumi was influenced by Shakespeare when it comes to literature influences. At that time there were no video games when he was little, so he read a lot of novels and theatre literatures. He wrote them under the impression of a small-scale theatre play because of cost limitations. Yoshida commented further that game development is always about how to work around things with a limited cost, but also to follow the rules given. When creating games, what is the thing you prioritize and treasure the most? Deadlines. Of course, the feeling of playing it where the players must feel fun while playing the game he makes, so the challenge is how to make it fun. That and the game atmosphere. Aside from story, what is the thing you like about Final Fantasy XIV? So much, for it feels kinda for praising the game considering it's obvious by then. But still, story, especially the part where Alpha Now despaired but stood up for change and for the better. Yoshida took special steps to flesh out Alpha Now more, like what kind of dialogue to include, his character development and his growth. Enterprise Liftoff is not by Yoshida, but included by Mahiro-san, the A Realm Reborn scenario writer. The 15th question, what do you want to tell Yoshi P? Eureka improvements. He wants Yoshi P to improve on Eureka aspect where the players can track their other party members if they've got too far away, and general quality of life improvements. At this point Yoshida feels pressured and Yasumi-san says he's looking at them from a player's point of view, so deal with it for now. As we've seen in a previous video, they've already looked at quality of life changes, including the tracking of your own party members and the distance increase, which is actually getting put into 4.3, so they are actually listening to actual feedback, which is pretty good. Another question was, what kind of game would you like to develop other than Return to Ivalice? If given chance, if there is a chance to liberate Dalmasca, he would like to write the scenario for it. When asked whether it's a scenario or content including battles and all, he answered scenario only, and this made Yoshida frustrated because he wanted him to be involved in the content. Yoshida has the idea to do a war scenario out of Dalmasca, like a war-type raid, but that's just an idea and nothing concrete as of yet. Are there any games that you think people should pay attention to? Apparently they're looking forward to Red Dead Redemption 2 and they want something like Westworld in a game. Another question here, any food that you would like to implement into Final Fantasy XIV, since you did one food last time and it looked delicious. Ethnic type food, something very ethnic, maybe they can do something for Favnarian. The next question, what's the biggest motivation for him when working? It comes down to the user's response, once you put sales aside. What the users love and what they actually hate. And the final question, if you are given another instruction from Yoshi P to, say, do this, would you? He then jokingly said nope, he'd rather him ask people younger than him to do it instead of him. If he was asked to restore the elemental system into Final Fantasy XIV, he'd do it. Maybe we can see a collaboration of games other than Final Fantasy XIV between Yoshi P and Yasumi Matsuno. And that is the end of the Q&A. Obviously this is a lot of broken English, but essentially you can get the gist that they've got a lot of plans for Yasumi. He's a brilliant story writer and he's done an amazing job on the Return to Ivalice series, and it's only going to be much better as he continues development on it. Yoshi P wants to get him into other projects in the future. That war idea would be really cool. Whether or not that will be in this patch cycle, I have no idea. It might even be in the next expansion if we're pushing further towards Garlemald. Either way, that was a really cool section. I hope you enjoyed listening to this. A lot of this was translated by Aluna Minori over at the Final Fantasy subreddit Discord. Go and check that out and give them love. I will link the Reddit discussion for the mega thread for Final Fantasy XIV's patch 4.3 live letter 44 notes. And I'll see you all next time.